Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter, where we take the mystery out of the tarot and help you bring this ancient practice into everyday life. In this podcast, we'll talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So grab your tarot deck, get comfortable, and start your journey to tarot with Bonnie and Peter. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. Today, we're actually going to, I don't want to call it a spin-off, but we're going to sort of follow up on a theme topic that we had with our last guest, Yasmin Boland, where we talked an awful lot about the moon and the moon's influence on our practice, on magic, how we can manifest through the moon, both the full moon and the new moon. And Bonnie and I thought it would be a really great time for us to look at where we find the moon in the tarot. So today we're going to take a look at the Major Arcana cards that are in some way connected to the moon. This is the first episode that we've had that's been focused on Major Arcana cards. If you go back into our back catalog, you will find episodes on all the cards of the Minor Arcana. You'll find an episode on the court cards. But today, we're going to talk specifically about 3 cards that have to do with the moon. And we're going to explain their connection as well. So, Bonnie, do you want to let people know what those, because I just said, cards about the moon. One might be obvious, but, what do you think? Want to let them know where we're going?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm also learning something too in this episode, or that I've been learning through Peter throughout this whole journey, is sort of these astrological, planetary associations with the cards. So for the moon, I would have thought, okay, well, the moon is the moon card, right. But there's also 2 other cards that are quite symbolic in terms of working with the moon and that energy. And it's the High Priestess and the Chariot. So today we're going to be talking about the moon, High Priestess and Chariot, and how the moon weaves its magic into all of those cards, and how we can work with that. So I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I will say I'm excited. Longtime listeners will know I have an interesting history with the moon card as well. Although I am getting better, I do find we're 40 plus episodes in. And one of the things I love about, our experience with this podcast is it's a learning experience for me as well. So I also think, because I think the card has come up a couple of times in readings. It certainly was talked about in our last episode with Yasmin Boland. And I am definitely becoming much, much more familiar. But I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, it's the moon. We have to talk about the moon card. Because for me, from an astrological perspective, the moon actually, the card of the moon is not linked to the moon at all. It's not linked through rulership, and it's not linked through sign. But, and I think I mentioned the moon is the only kind of planet or luminary that has 3 cards attached to it, directly attached to it by name, by rulership, and by correspondence. So you want to start with the moon, don't you?
Sure. Yeah, let's start. But can I just tell a little story?
Yeah, and, of course.
You can cut this out if you want to, Peter, because I'm going to reveal a bit of personal information about you. But when
who's listening right now, because if this section gets cut out, people are going to be going, excuse me, can you please put that back in? So there's not a chance it's not coming out.
So Peter and I met a few years ago at a function called Tea and Tarot, where we would go and read, practice doing readings for each other. It was the first time I had ever read for a stranger. And Peter was the very first person that I read for and who I met at this event.
Remember.
Do you remember the card that you pulled?
I remember the card that I pulled. Yes, I pulled the moon card, actually.
And you said, because I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to tell Peter about the moon that he doesn't already know? And you said that back then. You're like, wow, the moon, this card trips me up sometimes. and I gave you my interpretation of the moon. So I think the moon is our card, people have a song. I think the moon is our card.
Yeah. No, that's probably pretty fair. And I always think, because And in some ways, when I reflect on that, we're going to talk about the moon card, because I think the star card in particular has a level of vulnerability to it. But I think the moon card does as well, especially because it talks about those things that we're afraid of. And I just think there's a level of irony there that, in the tarot deck, I'm not really afraid of anything. You'd think, oh, I'd be afraid of the devil card or death. And the card that I have that I fear the most of all the cards is actually the card that has to do with our hidden fears. It's the moon card. So, I remember, because your interpretation, I loved how you went about talking about the card. And one of the things you had told me is like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything about the cards. And I think it was more, I'm really new at the tarot. And I was blown away. I'm like, you were like, oh, I think it's just been a few months, or might have been less than a year. And yeah, anyways, so it was good. Yeah, it totally can be. It should be our card, right? We will refer to the moon card as the Bonnie and Peter card. So
Bonnie and Peter, yes. I love that. Yeah, well, it's funny that you're sort of not like afraid of the card, but if we think about the moon card, what is that card really about? It's about it can be about fears, right? Like, really, when I see the moon card, it's about like, what are we ready to bring to the surface? What are we ready to start looking at? And, but there's so much in that card too, right? Like, we can talk about illusion. We can talk about our intuition, like how we're connected to our intuition. It's also the card about like dreams, like dream interpretation. So maybe if you're wanting to interpret a dream and you pull that moon card out, that can, sort of spark something for you there. It's also like the unconscious, things that are mysterious. So it really is that card that speaks about like the unseen and the uncertain, right? And sort of what lies beneath the surface of consciousness. And it gives us an invitation to do that. And I've said this before, and I'll say that again, but with Sasha Graham, I did a course with her, and she spoke about the moon card, about, the sun card is such an amazing card because it's so bright and, it's just really, really strong energy. But sometimes it's hard for us to bring things out in the sunlight because it's so strong. But what the moon card offers us is that gentle illumination, right? Like, we can still, when the full moon is out, we can still see outside. So it's like allowing us to bring up those things that we're uncertain about, or maybe things that we're afraid of, and looking at it in a softer light, in a way that's a little bit more inviting. So that's sort of my take about the moon. What do you think, Peter, or what do you have to add to that?
No, I love.
You have a whole astrological side that you
know. Well, because I think when we talk about the idea of it's almost blurred lines with the moon. Like, there's no. Wishy-washy is not quite right, but there is a real sort of, you said soft light, so there is a real softness to it. I won't get into its astrological correspondence other than to mention that it's Pisces, which is also very, kind of, it has some flow. It's often seen as being, as being softer, and that's sort of where that comes from with the moon. But I sometimes think, I love the analogy when you talked about the idea that, that there is soft light, and that the moon can help us see things that might be too bright to see in stark, in your face sunlight. Because I often think of the moon as a guide, but it guides us. And I'll get into this a little bit when we talk about the High Priestess, which is the card kind of linked to the moon. It doesn't necessarily guide us with clarity. It's still like with the sun, when you got sunlight in front of you, you don't really need to think about where you're going much. You don't have to think, oh my goodness, is my next step a safe one? Is it not a safe one? I can see where I'm going in bright sunlight. I can see for kilometers and kilometers where I'm going. We can't do that in the moonlight. In the moonlight, the scope of our journey is limited. So what we can see is only really what's directly in front of us. However, and where I was going with the idea of the moon as guide is, I think about its reductive quality. So I think about, the moon is card 18. If we take 1 and 8 and we add it together, what do we get? We get 9. And what card is associated with the number 9 in the Major Arcana? The Hermit. Right. So I think about the hermit as not being, we sometimes people think that the hermit is a guide, and I say the hermit isn't necessarily a guide. The hermit is what we seek. It's kind of the guru, whereas the moon is sort of the guiding aspect that the hermit brings. So we have that introspection, we have that reflection, which is very moon-like, and then we start to use the light or we start to use sort of that idea of moonlight to slowly bring what we've been thinking about, fears, uncertainty, intuition, all those kind of moon things, and we slowly bring them to the surface. We slowly bring them to light, not by quickly putting on, the big giant spotlight bulb, but instead by using softer moonlight. I don't know. Sorry, was that too philosophical?
No, not at all. It's all welcome here, Peter. It's all good. I mean, that's the whole point of like seeing it from all these different perspectives. Another thing too about the moon that Yasmin mentioned the last time she was on the podcast, she talked about the divine feminine aspect of the moon. And I also love that too. So really, the moon sort of rules those cycles that we go through. So also sort of seeing like I know we'll talk about that a little bit more with the High Priestess, but that is also, that energy is sort of encompassed in that card as well. So like that divine feminine, that intuition, that sort of watery, flowy energy. So that can be very mysterious and hard for us to look at. So it is a very complex card, I think.
Well, and it's interesting because you talk about our episode with Yasmin, and she had mentioned the concept of moonlight being the only light that actually blends both the sun and the moon, that it has a real blend of that strong feminine energy that's embodied in the moon, and also combines that the more masculine energy that's embodied in the sun as well. And that kind of bathing yourself in moonlight is bathing yourself in the blend of those two energies, both that strong feminine archetypal energy that comes with the moon, and then the archetypal energy of the archetypal male energy that comes with the sun as well. So
she called it the moonbeams, which I love.
I know. I'm waiting for the next kind of clear sky full moon to be like, all right, I'm heading out. I'm bathing in moonbeams for sure.
It's magical.
Yeah.
Do we want to move on to the High Priestess?
I don't think, because I'm trying to think. If I look at because I've got so I was looking for people who are on I'm looking down. You're wondering maybe, well, what the hell is he doing? The three cards we're looking at, I have in front of me, so I'm just trying to look at the card. And I was reminded that the moon in the Rider-Waite-Smith is sometimes, it looks like it could be the moon or the sun. Like it looks like both a crescent moon and a full moon, but it also really does actually look like, is it an eclipse? Is it a full moon? Is it a crescent? Like, what is it exactly? Even the representation of the moon in that card sort of highlights the mystery of the card itself. Because I do think sometimes when you're working with the card, with the moon card in a reading, sometimes the moon card says you're missing information. Something is unclear. You need to search within. That answer that you want, is going to be a little muddy. It's not necessarily going to be, here's the answer. So I don't know. That's I have nothing else to add about the moon. Do you have any last kind of pieces of wisdom around that powerful yet somewhat frightening card? No.
No, I do think it's a mysterious card. And I think it'll always be one of those cards that when it comes up, it's like, ooh, how are we going to look at this? So, I think there's a lot of depth to that card, and you could probably spend hours just, studying and talking about the moon.
Yeah, you totally could. And who knows, maybe that's an idea for a future episode. Maybe we'll go a little bit deeper, and while it would be 22 different ideas we could have if we did an episode on each one of the major arcana. If that's something that would be of interest to you, if you're listening or watching, put it in the comments. Yes. Yeah. Bonnie, Peter, please do an episode, one on each of the major cards. All right.
Yay. Okay, High Priestess, do we dive
I
in?
Yeah, let's dive into the High Priestess. I look, to me, I think this would have been one of the first cards that I felt significantly connected to in the tarot. I love the High Priestess card. And I always think, and again, not to kind of get binary or gender based, that might sound odd for a guy who identifies masculine, who is cisgendered. But I love the power of the High Priestess, and reminds me of a time when I used to have a moon made of hematite hanging from the rear view mirror of my car. I had it for years and years and years because I find, because this is the card that when we talk about an astrological correspondence, the High Priestess is the card that corresponds to the moon. And I just think that there's a real power. It's still a mysterious power, but there is a real power of, I'll say, mysterious manifestation that exists inside that High Priestess card. So if we go one step back and we think about that Magician card, it's a card of manifestation, but so is this one. But I just find that there is a significant level, of power, that this is the Oracle of Delphi. This is the information that you get, but that you have to think about, that, it doesn't come from a pathway of clarity. It is sometimes a riddle that you have to decipher. It requires an element of intuition and intellect. I think about, sometimes the challenge that we encounter in a card like the Two of Swords, where, we've got a decision to make and the card's got water in the background, and we're like, oh, am I thinking about something from an emotional perspective, or am I thinking about it from, an intellectual perspective? I think the High Priestess brings those elements together in a Major Arcana card, along with the power of the moon. So brings that idea of intuition, brings that idea of mystery, brings that idea of power, brings that idea of archetypal feminine manifestation, brings the power of the goddess for the first time into the pathway of the Major Arcana. It's really only the third card, right? Fool, Magician, High Priestess. So we get to meet the goddess for the first time as well. So I don't know. I really, yeah. And then, like, for those who want to get esoteric, we've got the three pillars of the Kabbalistic tree of life, two pillars on either side, and then that middle column that's sort of behind her, behind the veil of the card. So much information in this card as well. It's deep and it's rich and it's powerful. Oh, how about you when it comes to the High Priestess?
Yeah, Peter. So I completely agree with you. And it's funny, when I bought the Lightseers Tarot by Chris Ann, I think one of the exercises in the deck was go through the deck and see which card you like best, or which card, I don't know if it was how you identify, or just which card you like best. I picked the High Priestess, and I didn't know about the tarot when I was sort of going through that exercise, but it was something about that card that I was like, oh, I'm like this, or like it just really resonated with me. So it's funny that we sort of both have that same experience with the card. But yeah, I love High Priestess energy. It's again, very much like the moon. It's mysterious, and it's about our inner wisdom, like our inner knowing, and taking the time to really connect with that. Connecting to like our intuition, following that gut feeling, right? It's about, we already have all the answers inside of us, but we keep looking on the outside for all of our answers. And the High Priestess is like, no, wait a minute. You already know everything that you need to know. Like, eternal wisdom lives within you. So how can you use the energy of the High Priestess to go within to really discover what you already, like, it's already there. So it's really important, I think, for me to like develop that relationship to the High Priestess, because that's really you and this vast knowledge that you already contain. So when this card comes up for, in a reading, and if somebody's looking for an answer, I'm like, like, this isn't about searching for the answer. This is about, you already have it. So, it's taking that time to to be still, to go within, right? And like the high priestess doesn't chase answers, she waits for them. So that's really like, again, if it comes up in a reading, it's like, no, this is inaction, right? Like we're being still, we're not taking action here. And the message is coming. So it's going to come like in divine timing or when it's right. So that's kind of how I see the high priestess. It's like, amazing energy, right? Like it just like, like if we really think about that, we contain all that knowledge, like really. So how do we do that? How do we cultivate a practice where we can be still and discover all those answers? So that's my take on the high priestess. I love her.
I love how you said, that because in probably the first iterations of any study I would have done, the myth that gets, or the persona that gets associated with this card is the Oracle at Delphi. And then somebody reminded, might have been James Wells actually at one point in time, where the Oracle at Delphi went nowhere to give anyone advice. Everybody came to the Oracle to get advice. So the idea that, when you had said, that the high priestess is not an invitation for you to go out and seek answers, that the answers are already within you, that the answers are there, right? You don't need to go and seek them. That what you need to do instead is to try and work through, the riddle, work through the deciphering, do the work that kind of requires you to have to go within to get the answer yourself. Because there's nothing that you can do. There's no one you need to go to, no experience that you need to have, that doesn't already, that will bring you closer to the answer. The high priestess is great. What a great card.
It's such a great card. I love to see the high priestess in a reading. And so many decks, they depict the high priestess as like a tarot reader or something. And I love that depiction of the high priestess. And I think the tarot really, in a sense, is us developing our own high priestess energy, right? It's, when you work with the tarot, it's really about like understanding your own intuition and the language of that intuition through the symbolism of the card. So I think that's such an interesting connection that people make with the high priestess, reading tarot cards, because that can be a way where, we're getting grounded and sort of having these moments and creating space to allow our intuition to come through and what we're seeing in the cards that come up for us. So
interesting. You said that the high priestess is often like the tarot reader of the deck, and I can't think of decks, but that would be an interesting image to have the high priestess sitting at a table. You've got one high priestess sitting at a table doing a tarot reading.
Yeah, so this is from the Everyday Witch Tarot by Deborah Blake. I have to. So this is the high priestess. She's got her tarot cards. She's got her crystal ball. She's got books behind her. There's also like stones, like those are
like runes.
Yeah. Yeah. And her black cat on the table. So
of course.
I love that.
So I mean, what a great image for the high priestess is, the development of that skill set that almost in some ways, personifies itself through tarot reading. So very, very powerful card.
Yep.
We want to move on to the last one.
Yes, to the Chariot.
Yeah, which is, do you want to start with this one, or?
I can, if you want. I mean, I know you have more layers to add than I do with.
Goodness. No, I love listening. I love listening to the insight that you provide. The cards. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but
No, that's okay. What I love about all three of these cards is there's an element of mystery.
Yeah.
And I think that there's also an element of mystery with the Chariot. And I wouldn't have ever associated the Chariot with the moon, but in learning from you, it's, and I'm sure you'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's association with Cancer, and I guess the moon rules Cancer.
Correct.
Is that?
You got it.
Okay. Whoa, I'm learning. Okay, look at that. So the Chariot for me is about, sort of going on this quest, right? You're going on a journey. You're the one who's in control of the Chariot. And it's sort of having that like will and determination to go forward, even if it feels uncomfortable. And when I look at that with the association of the moon, it's like following that intuition, using that insight that you have to take you on this journey, because quite often with the Chariot, you have a destination in mind, but you don't necessarily know how you're going to get there, what the right path is. But the importance is actually taking action, starting the journey, and then seeing, which way you're going to sort of end up to get to the final destination. So, and I think I love that aspect of the moon, of being like trusting your gut, following your intuition, to once you're on the journey to continue following that intuition. But also, if you have a nudge that there's something that you want to do, it's like the Chariot is giving you an invitation, like go out and do it.
Yeah.
Like take action. So I also love the Chariot. I think it's a wonderful card. And again, when we see like either two different colored horses or the sphinxes on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, it's like, one is black, one is white. It's like these opposing forces. And the way that I look at that is like being afraid, but being excited at the same time. So how do I take those and still move forward, or having that like masculine and feminine energy, bringing that together and continuing to move forward. So it's also, I mean, they're all amazing, strong cards, right? With like so much depth to them. But I like to see the Chariot in a reading. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I do too. It's funny you talk about the idea of the different colors and often diametrically opposed colors of whatever happens to be sort of driving the Chariot, because I always think of that as being almost any two I guess perceived opposing forces that are needed to be able to help that movement. That, the Chariot in the Rider-Waite-Smith requires both horses or both sphinxes to be able to move forward. It requires the white one and it requires the black one. So it requires both those things that we love and that challenge us, or both those things that we need and that we want, or, both of those things that are going to help us move forward, but are also going to be an obstacle. That all of those things, that kind of big, that package of everything on one side of the equation, everything on the other, is actually something that we need to move forward. So, for those who are wondering, why the hell the Chariot is linked to the moon, or I'm going to tell you. So the Chariot's correspondence astrologically, and this is, for me, it's always through the astrological correspondences of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, although this correspondence is pretty common, is through Cancer. And then astrologically, the planet, or in this case, the luminary, but it's called a planet, that rules Cancer is the moon. So the moon is associated to the Chariot through its rulership of Cancer. And you don't, like, if you take a look at Pamela Coleman Smith's drawings on the moon, on the Chariot card, you see the moon everywhere. So you see the moon on the epaulettes of the charioteer. And then I also think the concept of home, that is part of that Cancerian element, that idea of, the Cancer is represented by the crab. So the crab brings its home on its back. And I always think of that in the element of the Chariot. The charioteer is about to go out on some kind of journey. They're leaving what they would call home. They're leaving that sense of comfort, which is very moon-like energy. That idea of, how can I feel secure? How is, I think of this card, it can be the card of, the mama bear kind of letting their cubs sort of leave, for the very first time. Well, that's fine and dandy, but if, predator crosses those cubs, mama bear is coming, very, very quickly, very protective, like the charioteer would be. So, I sometimes think, and I know I'm talking in roundabout ways, so my apologies, I'm going to try and synthesize this. Sometimes the charioteer it's bringing that experience that we would call home, bringing that which grounds us, that which secures us particularly, and then using all of that as we make our choice to move forward in our journey. Because that's the Chariot card, when we see it, it really is about, a willful moving forward. It's, trying to move forward for what it is that you feel that you want or you need. It's saying, I'm going to take those steps. I'm going to start that journey to bring me towards that end goal. But I'm going to remember where I came from. That's sort of that moon part of it. I'm going to remember what was important. I'm not going to lose myself as part of the journey. I'm going to take all of the things with me. I don't know. That's kind of where I see that moonlight connection with this card, is through that sense of home, the sense of all the things that made me who I am. I don't mean me. I mean, like made us who we are when we then choose to move forward in that journey of the chariot, that we are bringing that sense of self with us. So
I love that, Peter. Thank you for that. Like bringing that insight. That's something that I often don't look at with the chariot, but I will now. The crab brings their home with them. So you're going out on this journey. You are bringing all those parts of you, and it's a reminder to do that, because I think sometimes we go on journeys and we only bring the parts of us that we want to show up, and the other parts we leave behind.
Right.
And that could even be those two opposing forces, right? It's like bringing them all together. And I love what you said about the leaving of the comfort zone. I actually do associate that as well with the card. It's like you see the city in the background and they're moving forward. So it is taking that, like, leaving your comfort zone of your home and then going, moving forward. And often too, I think I've heard people talk about it as like, someone going off to university, right? They're leaving their home and now they're on this new journey and they're moving forward in that. But I love that insight of like bringing all the parts of you on this journey. I think that's so important and like such great insight.
I love that, heading off to university. I think that's a great analogy of this card. And even the, like when we think about, and we've talked about this before, we think about, Jung's sort of, the journey of the hero or of the heroine, that the age that the charioteer is at is probably in and around that time. It's not to say that when this card shows up, for those of us who are well past the age in which we would, head off to university, but there is a youthful energy to the chariot. There's a sense, it's almost like a night-like energy. Like by night, I mean not the night sky, but night, Knight, the four knights of the tarot. It really is very action oriented. It is movement oriented. The other thing, though, with its link to Cancer, the crab, and then the moon, is we have to think about how a crab moves. So sometimes we have to be reminded that although the chariot, we feel like it should be moving in a straight line and moving swiftly and moving forward, its connection to Cancer is there to remind us that, maybe not always forward movement, that, the crab doesn't move forward. Crabs typically move sideways. So this might also be a journey that it isn't as straightforward as it appears either, that, there are kind of opposing forces. So I always think that moon/Cancer connection to the crab, that reminds me of that in this card as well. So
yeah, like you have a destination, but you don't necessarily know which path you're going to take to get there. And that's too like this energy of the chariot of like, just forward motion is important and don't worry about the rest. Like, you take that first step and the next step will reveal itself, kind of thing. So
yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. Well, no, me too. And I think it's a card. I was reading Susie Chang's book, Four Stories, and I've been kind of going through it. And she talks about, she reiterates the idea that, the astrological correspondences were really superimposed on top of the tarot. And that sometimes that chariot card with its connection to Cancer is one of those examples where you're like, really? Like, I can't see that at all. And, I sometimes think it's one of the most challenging correspondences in the deck because it's not obvious, but it also it causes us to have to think a little bit with some of those ideas of movement and security and whatnot. So, yeah.
For sure.
I love this. I love this card too. I love this card. I love this. My deck, my favorite deck, the Gaian Tarot. The iteration of this card is actually called the Canoe. So it's about forward movement, but forward movement in water, which again has that connection to the moon. That that idea of water. And then I'll mention the guy in tarot, and perhaps that'll be, a hidden clue as to an upcoming guest that we have, coming on our podcast as well. Who knows? So let me just put that out there.
Awesome. Yeah, I've even seen, I have a deck that has the Chariot, but it's a snail. So the person is actually riding a snail. So it doesn't have to be about this, like, it doesn't have to be fast
Correct.
movement.
Yeah.
It's movement, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it could be at a snail's pace, but you're still moving. So
it could be at a crab's pace as well, right? Could be sideways, like could be movement
sideways.
that goes little sideways, little forward. It's like that expression, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Could even be 2 steps forward, 1 step sideways, 1 step forward, 1 step sideways, 1 step back. It isn't necessarily, the journey isn't always, progress isn't linear, right?
No, for sure. And the journey is just as important as the destination, right? So it's almost like, how can I enjoy this journey? Like I want to get to that place, but I also want to enjoy the journey too. So maybe that could be,
Yeah, and the chariot is sometimes a reminder of that too, is that, whatever quest that we happen to be going on, and often that it's an indication of a quest that started. It's a reminder that says, 1, don't forget who you are, and 2, don't forget to take the time to, whatever the cliche or expression is, don't take the time, miss the time to smell the roses, or that the journey. It's the importance of the journey and not the destination, and so forth and so on. But the chariot really is a good reminder of that. So.
Yeah. Ooh, good chariot energy.
I know, right? Exactly.
Which brings us to the part of our show where we pull a card. Are we ready to pull a card, Peter?
Yep, I am. I've got, so I'm going to use, I'm trying to think, it's Victoria. I'll go back. My apologies. We'll maybe put it in the show notes. But I'm using the Black Tarot, which I've used before, which is a black and gray deck. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. I will say that. I don't know where it's produced, and I want to say Victoria Inn, but I'm not 100% sure. So we always like to give credit to the creators, and I'm forgetting the name, and my box isn't around because it was in a deck. But that's what I'm using today. I'm going to use the Black Tarot. So shuffling it, you can hear, and sometimes, I saw you last time. You were like, when Yasmin, you were proving to Yasmin that, you were actually shuffling all the cards.
Well, she thought I was going to take the tower.
And take all the hard cards
out of the deck.
Yeah. What about, I still haven't done, I got to do shuffling music too one of these days.
Yes. One of these days.
I will. I think about it every time I'm shuffling the cards, and I think about it at no other time. All right. How about you? Are you,
Yeah. So I have my card because it jumped out when I was shuffling.
Oh, okay.
As you were talking. Okay. I'm using the Dreamkeeper's Tarot by Liz Houston. Okay. And yes. So do you want to
start? Since I haven't pulled a card yet. So
you haven't pulled a card yet? Okay, yeah. I was shuffling and it came out and I'm like, okay, I'm going to honor this card.
And pull. Okay. All right. I pulled a card. You go.
Okay. So I pulled the 7 of Swords.
Interesting.
My stalker card. This card loves to visit me on a very regular basis. So in this deck, it has a woman wearing a beautiful red gown. She has a mask on and she's carrying swords. She's got 7 swords in her hand. It's funny that we talk about mystery today in the moon, and then we get the 7 of Swords. Although it's not so much mystery, but it's kind of about not wanting to be seen. And if we sort of link that back to the moon, it's like, what do we not want to look at? Right? It's those fears. And, the moon gives us that invitation to allow those fears to be seen. So the 7 of Swords really, for me, when I get this card and the way I interpreted it, is about like hiding and not wanting to be seen. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really funny that showed up today. Tarot has been really funny with us lately in terms of the cards that are coming. So I think the 7 of Swords for me, again, is always like hiding doesn't do you any good, right? Nobody can see you when you're hiding. And what are you ready to take with you and to sort of go out and be seen, because hiding isn't serving you anymore. I know there's a lot of depth and other meanings to this card, but that's a really powerful message that I get from seeing that card. It's like, what do I want to carry with me and what do I want to leave behind? Because in a lot of decks, it shows like they're carrying,
Yeah.
maybe 5 swords and 2 swords are
Yeah.
staying back. So like,
And they've
what am
stole
I?
them, but it looks like they might. Yeah.
They exactly like they stole the swords and now they're trying to get away with something, right? Like they don't want to be seen in what it is that they're doing. So yeah, I'm
All
gonna
right.
say that it's an invitation to go. I mean, it's nice and sunny today. Maybe I need to get outside. If you're, if you've been stuck inside lately and you want to go out, or you're sort of dealing with, like playing small and, not sort of shining your light, I think this is an invitation to be able to be like, no, grab those swords that give you that mental capacity and ability to go out and be seen, and sort of to let those other swords, right? Like those fears and doubts, let those stay behind and take the ones that you want to take with you on your journey, right? With the chariot. Let's put it out there. So
I love that. And you
that's
mentioned the
what I
chariot,
got.
seven of swords, chariot 7 card, right?
Exactly.
So and you said, the tarot, how did you put that? I love how the
Then
tarot, how it works.
yeah.
So, because and for those who are watching, my apology, I looked distracted while Bonnie was talking, and I wasn't. I had taken out the cards of the minor arcana that are linked to the moon, and we weren't going to talk about them today. However, however, I'm going to mention them now, and I'm going to save the best for last. Although I know full well the card that I've drawn that's sitting here is one of the cards in this pile of 5 cards. So I won't get into why. Perhaps at some point in time, I'll talk about why these cards are linked to the moon. But they're suffice it to say that they're all part of a decan, so they're all part of 10 degrees of the zodiac wheel that is ruled by the moon. And they are the 6 of Pentacles, the 4 of Cups, the 9 of Wands, the 2 of Swords, and the 7 of Swords, ruled by the moon. Interestingly enough, the last 2 cards that we mentioned, 7 of Swords, I drew the 2 of Swords, also ruled by the moon. So when you talk about the idea, because it kind of reminds me a little bit of our last episode when, we were drawing a card for Yasmin. And what card do we draw for Yasmin Boland? We draw the moon card. So today, and I think we had this happen with Susie Chang as well, where we were there, all the cards were ruled by Venus, I believe, but there was a connection to the rulership that we drew. We drew all 3. So here we've drawn 2 of the 5 cards that are literally ruled by the moon. Well, we can't make this stuff up,
No.
So anyway.
And I didn't even know that with this.
Yes,
like this is Peter's.
For those that are watching, you probably at one point in time saw my face sort of, I was looking ready to just, because I'm like, I'm not going to add any more interpretation. I'm just in some ways going to show, yep, this card actually connects to the moon. And I drew the 2 of Swords. The 2 of Swords is also one of 5 minor arcana cards that are ruled by the moon. So, 2 of Swords. So this one, and this is actually a little bit different. Like the 2 of Swords are often being held by someone. These 2 are kind of driven into the ground, and it looks like the character that's behind it, instead of holding them, are kind of almost, and I say character because the characters in this deck they're kind of wispy and fantastical. They look like puffs of smoke almost. So if this is a character, they look like they might either be using them as a crutch or a cane. So they're being supported by these 2 swords. So I often think that so we got 2 swords stuck in the ground, and we've got somebody who's kind of being supported. So I think this reminds me a lot when we get this card is we've got a decision to make, and sometimes we're actually stuck about the decision that we have to make. It's like we're almost bogged down, and the card is often somebody who's blindfolded. So it's like, they can't see the option. They can't see the direction they need to go in. All they're being weighed down with are these two swords, these 2 decisions they have to make. And here the swords are actually stuck in the ground. So, the idea that the person is sort of being supported by these 2 decisions, but they don't know what to do because they're stuck. And I always think when I see this card, what we need to try and do is we need to try and reset balance in some way, right? Twos are about decision, reflection, but they are also about balance. So, what can I do to help restore this feeling of stuckness that I have, this feeling that I can't move forward? Because, to kind of quote my wife, sometimes the decision feels like it's in the too hard basket. You know what? Not going to decide too hard. And I think the Two of Swords is often a reminder to us, just do it. At some point in time, your action has to be to pick an option and move forward. And I would remind people when this card shows up in a reading, whether it's for myself or a client, that the Two of the Minor Arcana is the very beginning of the journey, that it is actually the first card to have any kind of action whatsoever, because the Ace isn't a card of action. It's actually a card of seed. It's a card of potential. That the Two of Swords actually represents the very first step, the very first steps that we're taking in whatever journey we have, whatever problem we need to face, whatever challenge it is that we're thinking about. And what's stopping us from moving, what's kind of crushing us from moving forward, what's blindfolding us, what's, got our sword stuck in the ground, is our inability to decide. And the two, to me anyways, the Two of Swords is just that invitation that says, this is not an end all and be all. This is not a life or death decision. Pick a path, move forward, and don't bother looking behind. Just go along that pathway. At some point in time, maybe you'll have the opportunity to recircle and make that other choice. These are not life and death decisions. These are not decisions that should be weighing you down. You really just have to kind of pick one and sort of go with it. The other thing, if we're linking to the moon, is it might be, despite the fact that this is a swords card in the air sign, the moon might be there to remind us that our intuition could be the assistance that we need to kind of guide us forward. So, and the bloody card, and it's ruled by the moon as well. So we drew 2 of 5 cards, that minor arcana cards that are ruled by the moon. What would you add for the Two of Swords, Bonnie?
Yeah, that was fantastic, Peter. Thank you for that. And amazing that we drew those two cards.
I know.
Yeah, definitely. I see the Two of Swords is about making a decision, right? And not making a decision is still making a decision. Right. So I like what you say about, like, you got to make a decision and move forward, right? Even if you don't make a decision, you're still moving forward with the decision that you didn't make. So are you happy with that? And if not, right? So yeah, and I love that it's linked to the moon. It makes so much sense because it's mystery. Why can't we make a decision? Because we don't know what the outcome is going to be, or else it would be easy. So really taking the time to go inward, right? Like, let's use that energy of the moon card. How can we follow our intuition? And normally in that card, they have the swords drawn across the heart, right? So it's kind of like the hands are across the heart.
I have it right here because I had all the cards of the moon all set and ready to go. Right? Totally. And what's what's in the background, right?
Yeah, a moon, right? And there's water in the background, which is funny because it's a card of swords. So I think this is not just about the intellect. I think it's not just about using the mind, but how can we combine, like, our intuition with our analytical mind to make a decision in that way? It doesn't always have to be about, like, oh, like, I have all the facts and I'm going to do it based on that. It's like, how can we draw on a little bit of that intuition and go within to try and make that decision?
Yeah. It's sometimes that idea of go with your gut. It's funny because I think I've mentioned before, I finished now my wines course through one of our local colleges. And, it's actually a precursor to sommelier, which I don't think I'm going to do. But I remember Dave, our instructor, who said, you're going to be getting wines to taste. And he said, do whatever notes you have to do, but go with your gut. Like, you're going to have information. It's going to be red fruit, black fruit, stone fruit. You'll know, the wine based on its color. But he reminded us that, it is also about your feeling. How do you feel about that? What is your gut telling you? So.
And what did we talk about today? High Priestess, right? What does High Priestess tell you? Go with your gut. Follow your intuition. Totally. So there's so many combining like energies that just marry so beautifully with each other in all of what we've presented today. I think that's amazing.
I agree. So
yeah.
All right, Bonnie, um, where can people find you and what have you got coming up?
Okay, so people, the best place to find me is my website, which is breathewithbonnie.com. If you'd like to stay up to date with what I have going on, I would invite you to join my newsletter. I'll send out all the things that I have going on through there. You'll also get a free meditation. And what do I have going on? I'm actually doing an in-person tarot workshop. So if you're in the area, it's going to be hosted at the Barn in Tottenham. That's coming up on May 1st, and that's called Tarot as a Mirror, not for the future, just for you right now. So we're going to work with the cards to see what the cards are showing us in this moment and what we can learn from that to move forward. So not using it so much as predictive, but helping us to see what can help us to move forward. What else do I have going on? I think I also have a series called The Soul's Journey, where we go into a Major Arcana card each month, and we sort of dive into the energy of that card, do some journaling, and then I take people through a meditation where we get to actually go and meet the archetype of that major card. So yeah, you can find everything on my website, and I would invite you to join my newsletter and then find out everything that I'm doing if that interests you. So what about you, Peter? Where can people find you? What do you have going on?
Well, people can find me, Peter White Tarot. So that's Instagram, Facebook, or peterwhitetarot.com on my website. What do I have going on? So interestingly enough, I have a couple of things in development. I've always talked about the idea of creating a self-contained 3-part class on the history of the tarot. So I'm diving pretty deeply into that. And I'm hoping to have that coming out soon, kind of a self-guided view of the history of both the tarot, the myths of the tarot, and then the origin of certain, I'll call them the 3 branches of the tarot cards. The other thing, though, that I will mention for the first time is something linked to what we actually did today. So when you talked about the idea, you said the Two of Swords, and that idea of, I love the fact that we see a bit of the High Priestess and the Moon, in this card. Starting on, the tentative date is June the 7th, and I picked this date to start a 12-month series called The Cards of the Zodiac. And I actually picked the cards of Cancer to start us off because I know that the Chariot is linked with Cancer. And I thought, well, what better card to start a journey through the tarot than the Chariot? And this series will happen once a month. It's a webinar. $22 will be the cost for, kind of each month. And we will look at all the cards associated with the zodiac sign. So for example, in the sign of Cancer, we're going to look at all the cards that are linked to Cancer, and we're going to look at some of the meaning. So when we saw today, well, my goodness, how can the Moon card be linked to the Two of Swords card, and so forth and so on? We're going to do a deep dive into each of the cards that are in some way linked to Cancer, and then we're going to move into the next sign, and so forth and so on. So this is actually going to be a 12-month series that I'm really excited about. It's perfect for the astrological student or the astrologer who wants to connect tarot to their own practice. It's perfect for the tarot student or practitioner who wants to in some way deepen their own practice with astrological correspondences. There'll be a practical aspect at the end of every webinar, 1 or 2 examples as to how we can use some of those cards to harness the energy of the sign during the sign season. So when we start with Cancer, how can you use some of the cards that are associated with Cancer to help harness the energy of Cancer season? I'm looking forward to that. Early bird pricing will come out mid-May. Best way to stay up to date with the start of that, if that's of interest, is, as Bonnie mentioned, sign up for the newsletter. So on my website, as well as in the show notes, will be a direct link on how to sign up for my newsletter. So that's what I've got going on.
Awesome. That sounds amazing, Peter, and something I'm definitely interested in.
Okay. Well,
as we know, I'm not so, what's the word?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
a mystery.
It's a mystery. Exactly.
It's a mystery.
I don't know all the astrological associations with the card. I know a few of them, but not many. So that sounds interesting.
I'm excited because I think it's a unique way to be able to kind of blend the two. It's not something that I've seen somebody do before to try and look at. I mean, there are books that would take a look at that, but I'm specifically going to look at those cards sort of through a monthly live webinar. But of course, the recording would be available for people. So if that's of interest to you, please, by all means, good. And you're always welcome. So,
Thanks, Peter. And we would like to thank everybody for joining us today on Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. If you like this episode, please leave us a really nice review. You can rate our podcast and subscribe. The more that you do that, the more other people can find us, and so that we can continue to share our love of tarot with everybody out there. So we appreciate you being here and listening. And if there's anything that you want us to talk about on a future episode, please email us, leave a comment. We love to hear from you, and we appreciate all the feedback. So thank you so much. And we will see you next time on Tarot with Bonnie and Peter.